The revelation shattered everything. When Will Spencer finally admitted to Electra that he had slept with Luna, the air between them turned from tense to explosive in seconds. Electra didn't scream, she didn't cry, her silence was more terrifying than anything else. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from fury held back too long. The betrayal was complete, the humiliation unbearable. Will's confession wasn't just a mistake, it was a declaration of war. Luna, pregnant and vulnerable, had become the eye of a storm neither family saw coming until it was already too late. Electra had always walked a fine line between chaos and composure, but now the balance was broken. She went straight to Forrester Creations, not bothering with subtlety, not pretending anymore. The moment she saw Luna alone in the design studio, she didn't hesitate. Words flew like daggers, accusations, insults, raw pain pouring out like a broken dam. Luna tried to defend herself, to explain what had happened, but Electra wasn't there to talk. She was there to unleash. The screaming match escalated in seconds. Objects were knocked over, fabric ripped from dress forms, papers scattered across the floor. And then it happened, Electra shoved Luna hard, too hard. Luna's body hit the floor with a sickening thud, and in an instant, everything changed. The fall wasn't just a fall. The pain that followed wasn't just physical. Luna screamed, clutching her stomach as she crumpled in agony. Blood pooled beneath her. Electra froze, her rage instantly replaced by horror, but it was too late. People came running, Ridge, Steffi, even Thomas, all drawn by the noise, the panic. Chaos exploded around Luna's trembling body. And Electra stood in the center of it all. The eye of the hurricane. Breathless and suddenly small. Someone called 911. Ridge yelled for help. Steffi took control, ordering everyone back, demanding room for Luna to breathe. By the time paramedics arrived, Luna was drifting in and out of consciousness. Her words were slurred, her pain too intense to hide. She was rushed to the hospital, a trail of sirens and flashing lights behind her. Electra, now surrounded by Spencer and Forrester, eyes full of blame and disbelief, was pulled away by security. Will showed up moments later, heart pounding, face pale as chalk. When he saw the blood on the floor, the panic on his sister's face, and the pure rage in Thomas's eyes, he knew everything had changed forever. At the hospital, the news was grim. The doctors worked furiously to stabilize Luna and save the baby. The hallway outside the turned into a war zone of whispers and accusations. Bill Spencer arrived like a thunderclap, furious, powerful, demanding answers. He confronted Will, and the moment he heard the truth, his fury was volcanic. His son had betrayed the family, slept with the girl who carried another man's child, and now Luna might lose that child because of it. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a legacy on the line. Brooke, Donna, Katie, they all came to the hospital. The Logans stood in protective unity, furious at Electra but worried sick about Luna. Meanwhile, Ridge tried to keep the Forrester name from being dragged into the tabloid flames already beginning to flicker online. Every minute brought new questions, new fallout. Reporters gathered outside the hospital. Paparazzi stalked every doorway. The police arrived shortly after, called in because the hospital reported an assault. Suddenly, this wasn't just personal, it was criminal. Electra was taken in for questioning. She tried to explain, tried to say she never meant to hurt Luna that way. But her words sounded empty. The detective assigned to the case, SGT Martinez, wasn't interested in emotional justifications. She wanted facts, motives, timelines. Electra admitted to pushing Luna. She admitted to being furious. She admitted to finding out about Luna and Will only hours before. Every word was recorded, every pause dissected. And as soon as she was done speaking, she was told not to leave town. Charges were pending. Back at the hospital, Luna regained consciousness long enough to ask about her baby. The silence that followed gave her the answer. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The child was gone. The life she had imagined was over. Her grief was too much for words, too much for sound. She shut down completely, retreating behind a wall of pain that no one could reach, not even Will. When he tried to speak to her, she turned away. When he touched her hand, she pulled back. In that moment, the distance between them became unbridgeable. The next morning, the press went wild. Headlines screamed betrayal, violence, and scandal. Spencer scandal ends in blood became the trending topic. Forrester executives scrambled to contain the damage. Ridge called an emergency meeting. Steffi wanted Electra banned permanently from all Forrester properties. Thomas was ready to press charges himself if Luna didn't. Brooke demanded a public statement supporting Luna, not just as a victim, but as a part of the Forrester family. Meanwhile, Bill tried to control the narrative from the Spencer side, but with so many personal failures piling up, even he couldn't spin this into anything salvageable. The police returned with official charges, aggravated assault resulting in miscarriage. Electra was arrested at her apartment, cameras flashing, neighbors whispering. She was booked, fingerprinted, and held for arraignment. Her lawyers immediately filed for bail. The judge, however, had seen the footage from the hospital, the security video from Forrester Creations, and Luna's statement. Bail was granted, but barely, and Electra walked out of jail into a sea of reporters and protesters. The Spencers and Forresters were now at war. Alliances shifted overnight. Will was cast out of his father's inner circle. Katie refused to speak to him. Brooke called him a disgrace. Even Donna, who had always been forgiving, told him to leave Luna alone. The Forresters were united in their rage. Luna's pain had become their battle cry. Thomas, who once had been conflicted, now only wanted justice. He began working with Luna's lawyers to file a civil suit against Electra, demanding compensation for the emotional and physical damages. Electra's name became poison. No designer would work with her. No publication would feature her. She was blacklisted from the industry overnight. In court, the drama turned public. Every painful detail was read into the record. Will's affair, Electra's assault, Luna's miscarriage. The court gallery was filled with press, family, former friends, all watching as the private sins of the powerful became a matter of legal judgment. Electra sat with her head high, refusing to cry. Luna testified, her voice shaking but clear. She spoke about the fall, the pain, the fear. She spoke about the child she had lost. The room went silent when she described the moment she realized she was bleeding on the floor, screaming for help that didn't come fast enough. Will was called to the stand, and his testimony broke the last threads of family unity. He admitted to everything. The affair, the lies, the fact that he hadn't told anyone until it was too late. He begged the court to see that Electra didn't mean to push Luna that hard. But his words fell flat. They weren't enough. The verdict came swiftly, guilty. Electra was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with possibility of parole in 1. The courtroom erupted, some in approval, others in disbelief. Electra didn't cry. She stood, accepted the cuffs, and left the room with the same stormy silence she had arrived with. Her story wasn't over, but it was paused. Outside the courtroom, the Spencer and Forrester families stood apart, divided by grief and blame. Luna left with Thomas, her hand in his, unsure of what the future held but certain of what she had survived. Will stood alone, watching them disappear into the distance, knowing he had lost more than just a lover. He had lost his place in both families. The fallout rippled for months. Forrester Creations rebranded, launching a campaign centered on strength, resilience, and women's voices. Luna became a silent symbol of that strength. Bill retreated from public view, issuing a single statement calling for privacy and accountability. Electra, behind bars, began writing, her only outlet in the concrete silence. She claimed she had been driven to madness by betrayal. But no one was listening anymore. The war between Electra and Luna had started in whispers and ended in blood. What began as a love triangle had become a legal and emotional catastrophe, tearing apart families, careers, and reputations. The cost had been unimaginable. The wound would take years to heal, if it ever could. But in Los Angeles, under the bright lights and darker secrets, nothing stays buried for long. New alliances were forming, old enemies were stirring, and as Luna tried to rebuild, Electra waited. Because revenge might sleep, but it never forgets. Bill Spencer's empire had survived scandals, betrayals, and boardroom wars, but the accusation now swirling around him was unlike anything he had ever faced. It started as a whisper in the corridors of Forrester Creations, a rumor too pointed to ignore. Bill had hidden Luna after her collapse, shielding her from questions, police involvement, and the press. The story grew quickly, spreading from backroom gossip to online headlines. And soon Ridge Forrester and Brooke Logan were no longer content with speculation. They wanted proof. To them, Bill wasn't just a ruthless businessman anymore. He was a man obstructing justice. A man who thought he could bend reality the way he bent markets. They decided, together, to bring him down, not just for what he had allegedly done to Luna but for every grudge that had built up between the Spencers and the Forresters over the years. Luna's disappearance had been the flashpoint. After the violent confrontation with Electra and the loss of her child, Luna had withdrawn completely from the public eye. No statements, no appearances, no explanations. Officially, she was recovering at an undisclosed location, but too many details didn't add up. Someone had been paying off staff at the clinic where she was last seen. Someone had secured private transportation for her under an alias. Someone had made sure the press couldn't trace her. Ridge's people dug into financial records, and a name kept surfacing. one of Bill's shell companies, used before to bury unpleasant business deals. That was all Ridge needed. He called Brooke, laid out the evidence, and they agreed. This was no longer about rivalry in fashion or family pride. This was about a man believing himself untouchable. Bill felt the walls tightening as soon as the first article dropped. Spencer tycoon accused of hiding Luna Forrester. Paparazzi camped outside Spencer Publications. His board demanded explanations. Investors called in panic, worried about liability. Even Katie, who had spent years defending Bill, began asking sharper questions. Bill, for once, didn't have a neat, cutting answer. He had been helping Luna, yes, but he had convinced himself it was compassion, not obstruction. She had come to him broken, terrified, unwilling to face the cameras or the relentless scrutiny of the Forresters. He had given her a place to stay, medical attention, a circle of protection. He told himself it was the right thing to do. But as the narrative spun out of his control, even he began to see how it looked. A powerful man hiding a vulnerable woman at the center of a crime investigation. Ridge and Brooke went on the offensive. Brooke used her media contacts to keep the story alive, feeding selective leaks about a cover-up and a secret safe house. Ridge hired private investigators who tailed Bill's associates, digging into every flight manifest, every private driver, every unusual withdrawal from Spencer accounts. Steffi, still furious over Luna's miscarriage and the chaos Electra had unleashed, joined her father's crusade. Even Thomas, once the most volatile of the Forresters, kept his temper in check long enough to coordinate the search. The goal wasn't just to expose Bill, it was to strip him of the aura of invincibility that had made him untouchable for so long. Bill countered as best he could. He called emergency meetings at Spencer Publications, barking orders at subordinates to shut down leaks. He hired his own legal team to prepare for the inevitable subpoenas. He even went to see Luna personally at the hidden estate in Malibu, trying to convince her to make a public statement that would clear his name. But Luna wasn't ready. She was still recovering, still raw from her loss, still distrustful of everyone, including Bill. She thanked him for his help but refused to be paraded as proof of his innocence. Bill left Malibu that night knowing his last line of defense was gone. The pressure reached a breaking point when Ridge and Brooke made their move at the fashion summit. Hosted at Forrester Creations, they publicly called out Bill in front of investors and the press, accusing him of harboring a witness and manipulating a tragedy for his own ends. The cameras caught every word. Bill's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He knew a direct denial would be useless without Luna standing beside him. Instead, he turned the accusation back on them, calling Ridge a hypocrite and Brooke a manipulator, dredging up their own scandals for the crowd. The exchange went viral within hours. Bill exposed trending alongside Forrester v. Spencer. Behind the scenes, something stranger was happening. The Forresters were reaching out to Bill's other enemies, media rivals, disillusioned investors, even figures inside Spencer Publications itself. Whispers of a truce began circulating, an alliance of people who normally hated each other but hated Bill more. Their goal wasn't to destroy him outright, that would take time, but to isolate him. First, they pressured advertisers to pull from Spencer's media outlets. Then they leaked confidential memos to regulatory agencies, inviting audits. Next, they began hinting to the press about new revelations tied to Luna's disappearance, dangling the promise of scandal like bait. Bill, meanwhile, was fighting a war on three fronts. In business, where deals were collapsing. In public opinion, where he was being painted as a villain. And in his personal life, where his relationships with Katie and his sons were unraveling. Wyatt refused to return his calls. Liam accused him of dragging the family name into the mud. Even Will, the son at the center of the Electra Luna debacle, stayed away, too ashamed to face his father. Bill had never looked more isolated. The legal front was the most dangerous. Ridge's investigators had found a flight log showing Bill's private jet making unscheduled trips to a small airfield near the Malibu estate. They handed it over to the police, along with affidavits from two staff members claiming they had been paid cash to keep quiet about Luna's stay. The DA's office, already under public pressure to act, opened an inquiry into possible obstruction of justice and unlawful concealment of a witness. Bill's lawyers argued that Luna was not a witness, that she had voluntarily accepted his help, that no law had been broken. But the optics were devastating. A grand jury subpoena arrived at Spencer Publications within days. Faced with the possibility of criminal charges and the collapse of his company, Bill did something no one expected. He reached out to Ridge and Brooke. He invited them to a private meeting at his downtown office, a place once used for hostile takeovers and backroom deals. There was no bluster in his voice this time, no threats. He admitted he had helped Luna, admitted he had kept her location secret, but swore he had done it only to protect her from the press and from Electra's lingering threats. He proposed a deal, a statement jointly released by all parties framing Luna's retreat as a medical necessity, not a cover-up. In exchange, Ridge and Brooke would drop their public accusations and back off the legal pressure. The meeting was tense. Brooke saw an opening to finally neutralize Bill, but Ridge was cautious. He knew destroying Bill outright could backfire, destabilizing business partnerships and igniting new feuds. Besides, Luna herself had confirmed in private to Steffi that Bill hadn't harmed her. After hours of negotiation, they reached a fragile truce. Ridge and Brooke would ease off their public attacks, and Bill would cooperate fully with the investigation, providing access to records and staff. The press would be told a softer version of the truth. Luna had been at a private recovery center arranged by Bill but had been free to leave at any time. The ceasefire was announced in a carefully worded joint statement released to all major outlets. It praised Luna's strength, condemned Electra's violence, and expressed regret for the misunderstandings surrounding her recovery. It also pledged full cooperation with authorities. For a moment, it seemed the war was over. Stock prices stabilized. Reporters moved on to new stories. Bill began repairing his relationships, even managing to see Will again. Ridge and Brooke publicly refocused on Forrester Creations, turning their attention to an upcoming fashion launch. But beneath the calm, none of the players trusted each other. Ridge had kept some evidence back, a set of bank transfers linking Bill's shell companies to hush payments. Brooke maintained her media contacts, ready to reignite the story if Bill tried to retaliate. Bill, humiliated by the ordeal, began quietly plotting his own counterstrike. He hired new investigators, this time to dig into Ridge's and Brooke's finances. Looking for leverage, he knew the truce was only a pause, not peace. Luna, meanwhile, remained the reluctant center of the storm. She eventually gave a brief interview to a sympathetic magazine, thanking Bill for his help but refusing to discuss the details. Her refusal to fully exonerate him kept the cloud over his head. The police inquiry didn't disappear, it simply slowed. Electra's trial loomed, promising to drag all the names back into the headlines. And within the walls of Forrester Creations and Spencer Publications, whispers of betrayal and revenge still echoed. Bill Spencer, once untouchable, had been brought to the brink, not by a competitor in business but by a scandal rooted in loyalty, secrecy, and a single decision to shelter Luna. The fragile alliance between Ridge, Brooke, and their usual rivals stood like a loaded weapon, its safety off, waiting for the next betrayal to pull the trigger. The war had shifted from open confrontation to quiet maneuvering, but everyone knew it wasn't over. In Los Angeles, under the flash of cameras and the weight of legacy, truces are just another word for preparation. And Bill, battered but unbroken, was already preparing.